All right, ready to dive deep. Today, we're tackling a huge question, one that's been pondered for, well, forever. What happens after we die?
It's a question that has fascinated and perplexed humankind for centuries.
It really has. And for this deep dive, we've got a fascinating mix of sources. We're exploring all sorts of different perspectives on the afterlife, from ancient religious texts to even dipping our toes into some quantum physics.
Oh, should be
Should
fun.
be a wild ride. And full disclosure, we're not going to come up with some definitive answer,
Oh,
but we are going to equip you with all the knowledge you need to kind of start forming your own conclusions.
yeah, giving you the tools and different ways to think about it. I think a good place to start is with the belief systems that have really shaped human thought for centuries. I mean,
Hmm.
we're talking about religious and spiritual traditions.
Yeah, the heavy hitters. We're talking about, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism. They all offer these really detailed visions of what's waiting for us after we die.
Yeah.
And for billions of people, these beliefs provide a lot of comfort, a framework for understanding the world, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important to note that these beliefs are not just abstract ideas, they're woven into the fabric of daily life. They shape rituals, ethics, social structures. I mean, for example, in the Quran, the Holy Book of Islam, contains very specific descriptions of both paradise and hell.
The imagery it's intense. Like in Surah Al-Waqiyah, you have paradise depicted with these incredible gardens with thornless lote trees and flowing rivers.
Hmm.
But then in Surah An-Naba, you have hell depicted as a place of, scorching fire and suffering.
Yeah, and those vivid descriptions really underscore the Islamic belief in accountability for our actions in this life. That our choices have consequences that extend beyond our earthly existence.
Right. So it's not just about that final destination, paradise or hell, but the Quran also describes that journey of the soul. Like in Surah Al-Baqarah, it kind of lays out this cycle of life, death, and resurrection.
And you've really hit on a core concept there in Islam, the belief that death is not the end. It's a transition to another phase of existence. And for Muslims, this awareness of potential judgment shapes their choices, guides their actions.
I see. It's like knowing there could be that ultimate accountability makes you want to live a better, a more righteous life. I mean, imagine truly believing in an afterlife like that. Wouldn't it change how you act today?
It certainly raises important questions about how our beliefs about the afterlife can impact our behavior here and now.
Absolutely. Now, while Islamic beliefs provide a structured and detailed view, there are other ways people have explored the afterlife, like those who've had near-death experiences.
Ah, yes, NDEs.
These moments where people who are clinically dead report having these profound experiences. It's almost like peering into another dimension.
Yeah, I mean, near-death experiences are incredibly fascinating, and I think what's so interesting about them is that these accounts, often from people of very different backgrounds, different cultures, share these common threads. The feeling of overwhelming peace, the sensation of moving through a tunnel towards a bright light, encountering deceased loved ones. These recurring themes are hard to just dismiss.
It makes you wonder, like, is it just the brain playing tricks under extreme stress?
Mm.
Or are these individuals somehow catching a glimpse of something beyond our normal perception?
Yeah. And that's the question that continues to fuel debate today. Some researchers believe that near death experiences can be explained by physiological changes in the brain, during trauma. However, there are others who see them as potential evidence of consciousness actually existing separately from the body. And that idea of consciousness being separate from the body, that kind of takes us into some interesting territory where philosophy and science start to intersect.
Oh, I love it when those worlds collide. Always makes for some really interesting conversations.
It really does. So, let's take a look at this concept of dualism. This philosophical idea, really championed by Rene Descartes, suggests that the mind and body are their distinct entities.
So basically, dualism is suggesting that consciousness doesn't have to die with the body, that the mind is this separate, independent thing that could go on living even when the body is gone.
Precisely. And it ties into a fundamental question that really continues to puzzle scientists and philosophers to this day, like the problem of consciousness. We still don't fully understand what consciousness is, how it arises, how it's even connected to the physical brain. So how can we definitively say that it just ceases to exist when the brain stops working?
It's like we've barely scratched the surface of understanding this amazing thing that allows us to think and feel and experience the world. To just assume that it, poof, disappears.
Yeah.
I mean, that's That's kind of a leap, isn't it?
I would agree. The very mystery of consciousness leaves the door open for the possibility of an afterlife, at least from a philosophical perspective.
Okay, so we've got religion, we've got near-death experiences, philosophy, all offering different perspectives. What about science? Where does modern science fit into all of this?
Well, there's one area of science that I think is particularly interesting when we talk about consciousness and the afterlife, and that's quantum physics. Now bear with me because we're about to get into some pretty mind-bending stuff here.
Oh, bring it on. Our listeners love a good mind-bending concept. We'll do our best to make it as accessible as possible.
All right, so the key idea here is that some physicists, and most notably Sir Roger Penrose, believe that consciousness might actually have a quantum aspect to it. They're suggesting that consciousness may not be solely explainable by those laws of classical physics, the physics that govern our everyday world.
So we're talking about the possibility that consciousness is operating on a totally different level, maybe even outside the constraints of space and time as we know them.
That's the general idea, though I do want to stress that this is still very much a hypothesis. It's not proven fact. But if this theory holds water, it opens up some really exciting possibilities about the nature of consciousness and its potential to exist beyond the physical body.
I mean, what if death isn't an ending,
Yeah.
but more like a transition to a different state of being,
hmm
a different dimension of existence? I know maybe I'm getting a little carried away here, but you have to admit it's a pretty fascinating concept.
I understand the enthusiasm. I think it's important to stay open to new ideas, even those that challenge our current understanding.
Okay, so we've got religious beliefs, near-death experiences, philosophy, quantum physics. But what about those personal stories? The anecdotal accounts that so many people find compelling. Dreams of loved ones who've passed, those strange coincidences that feel like more than just chance. How do those fit into the picture?
Those experiences, while anecdotal, can be incredibly powerful,
Yeah.
deeply meaningful for those who have them. And while they may not meet the standards of scientific proof, it's important to acknowledge the profound impact they have on people's understanding of life and death.
I mean, how can you dismiss something that feels so real and so significant to someone? It's part of their lived experience.
You can't, and you shouldn't. These experiences, even if they can't be scientifically explained, are part of that rich tapestry of human belief, and they contribute to this ongoing conversation about the afterlife.
And it's not just individual experiences, is it? I mean, these themes are woven into our cultural narratives. I mean, think about all the stories and myths and rituals across so many different societies that deal with the afterlife, journeys to other realms, spirits, ancestors. It's a universal theme, It speaks to something deep within us.
Absolutely. These cultural narratives, passed down through generations, offer comfort, continuity, and a sense of connection to something larger than ourselves. They provide that framework for understanding death and what might lie beyond.
So we've got all these different perspectives, these intriguing clues, these deeply personal experiences. But what about the scientific community? Where do they stand on the question of life after death?
Well, I think it's important to acknowledge the scientific perspective, which, relies on empirical evidence and rigorous testing. And to date, there is no scientifically accepted proof of life after death.
So the skeptics would say it's all wishful thinking, misinterpretations of brain activity, or just a way for humans to cope with the fear of the unknown.
That's a pretty fair representation of the skeptical viewpoint. They would argue that near-death experiences, for example, can be explained by those physiological changes that happen in the brain, under extreme stress. And that consciousness is just a product of the brain. When the brain stops functioning, consciousness ceases to exist.
But even with all the advancements in neuroscience, the brain is still such a mystery. We don't fully understand how consciousness arises, how thoughts and emotions are generated. What exactly makes me, me?
Exactly. And that's the crux of it. The very nature of consciousness is still largely unknown. And that leaves room for exploration, for questioning, for the possibility that there might be more to the story than we currently understand.
So where does that leave us? We've explored these ancient beliefs, personal accounts, philosophical arguments. We even touched on quantum physics a bit. But the question remains, what happens after we die?
It's the ultimate mystery, isn't it? And maybe that's part of what makes it so fascinating. We have all these different perspectives, each one offering a different lens to view this profound question. But in the end, there's no single definitive answer.
It seems like we each have to grapple with the evidence, weigh the possibilities, and ultimately come to our own conclusions.
Exactly. Some people find comfort in their faith, others in their personal experiences or philosophical explorations, and some find the scientific perspective the most compelling. There's no right or wrong way to approach this.
The important thing is to keep an open mind, right? To be willing to consider these different viewpoints and to respect the beliefs of others, even if they're different from our own.
Absolutely. Approaching this topic with a sense of humility and curiosity makes the exploration so much richer, so much more meaningful.
As we wrap up our deep dive today, I'm curious, what are some of the key takeaways you'd like our listeners to really think about?
Well, first and foremost, I'd say the question of what happens after death is a universal one. Cultures all across time and space have grappled with it. And there's something about this question that speaks to the very essence of what it means to be human.
It's like this innate desire to understand our place in the grand scheme of things, right? To find meaning and purpose beyond our limited time on Earth.
Exactly. And while we may never have that definitive answer, we've explored so many different perspectives, from that ancient wisdom embedded in these religious texts to those mind-boggling possibilities suggested by quantum physics. Each perspective offers its own piece of the puzzle.
And even if science hasn't definitively proven life after death, it hasn't ruled it out either. I mean, there's still so much we don't know about consciousness and how the brain works.
You've hit on a very important point there. The fact that consciousness remains this profound mystery leaves open the possibility that there might be more to our existence than what we currently understand.
So as we leave our listeners to contemplate this age-old question, what's one thought-provoking question you'd like to leave them with?
If I could leave you with one question to ponder, it would be this. If consciousness could exist independently from the brain, what would that mean for our understanding of life, death, and the universe itself? It's a question that challenges us to really stretch our imaginations, question our assumptions, and embrace the vast mystery that lies at the heart of our very being.
Ooh, that one definitely sends chills down my spine.
Ah.
And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive for today. But of course, the exploration doesn't end here.
Right. I encourage all of you to continue exploring this fascinating topic, to seek out diverse perspectives, and to engage in these thoughtful conversations with others.
Who knows, maybe someday we'll have a definitive answer to that age-old question of what lies beyond. But until then, keep asking those questions, keep searching for those answers, and keep that sense of wonder alive.